My name is Leila Morgan, and I stood quietly by the coffee station in the glass-walled boardroom of Halcyon West Partners, a real estate investment firm nestled in the heart of Denver, Colorado. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Partners adjusted cufflinks and murmured about the surprise merger offer from Ravell Co, a rising firm based out of Seattle. My older cousin Tyler Morgan, Halcyon's managing director, leaned back confidently in his chair near the head of the table. He assumed today's meeting was just a formality, another feather in his cap. I'd been here 3 years, supposedly as a secretary. Neutral dresses, no makeup, hair in a bun, unassuming, invisible. "Leila," Tyler called out, eyes on his phone. "Please make sure it's that Guatemalan roast. Ravell's team has taste. No repeats of that warehouse brand stuff you gave the auditors." I nodded and turned back toward the espresso machine. What he didn't know was that I had intentionally served that warehouse coffee to test them, to watch how Halcyon's partners treated people they considered beneath them. The results were predictable and useful. I brewed a pot of rich, single-origin roast, grown on my personal farm in Antigua, the one no one at this table knew I owned. My uncle, founder of Halcyon and now semi-retired, took his seat at the head of the table. He gave Tyler an approving smile as he passed, still proud of the nephew who'd supposedly rescued the company after the 2016 crash. "Let's begin," he said. "Ravell doesn't like delays." "They won't push back," Tyler replied. "We've got all the leverage." I nearly laughed. The projections in his binder were fiction, numbers I had planted, because the real data, that was on the documents in my briefcase. "Coffee, Leila, and don't trip this time," Tyler added, smirking. He still remembered my first day, when I deliberately fumbled a tray to see if anyone would even meet my eyes. No one had. Not my colleagues, not my uncle, not even Tyler, who used to call me his little sister, before I left at 26 to build something on my own. I was back now. And today, they'd find out who actually owned Ravell Co. As the boardroom door clicked shut behind Ravell Co's delegation, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier with expectation, and I could feel every pair of eyes at the table, calculating, anticipating. Tyler leaned forward, his pen tapping lightly against the table as he whispered something to our legal advisor. They assumed I was done once the coffee was served. They assumed wrong. The lead attorney from Ravell, a poised woman in a sharp navy pantsuit, opened the folder she'd been clutching. "Before we proceed, there are some documents we'd like reviewed and acknowledged by the full board." Tyler nodded absently. "Of course. Let's see what we're working with." The assistant beside her began distributing thick merger packets down the table. Pages printed on heavy linen stock, crisp headers, meticulously organized tabs. Then the silence hit. Halfway through the document, just beneath the terms of acquisition, bold black letters stood out across the top line. "Majority ownership, Leila Morgan." Tyler blinked. "What?" He looked across the table at my uncle, who looked just as confused. Heads turned. Pages rustled again. "I don't think this is right," my uncle said slowly. "Leila's just our secretary," I offered, my voice calm, controlled. That was the role I played, quietly, for 3 years. I wanted to see the inner workings again. What changed? What didn't? My cousin's face flushed a deep crimson. "This has to be a mistake." "No mistake," said Ravell's attorney smoothly. Ravell Co. was acquired in full last year by Morgan Vantage Holdings, which is, as you can verify, wholly owned by Ms. Leila Morgan. I stepped away from the wall, finally drawing every gaze. "So yes, Tyler, I've reviewed the numbers. All of them. Including the ones you hid from the board last quarter." The silence was sharp, dangerous. My uncle leaned forward slowly, trying to recover. "Leila, you never said anything." "No one asked," I said softly. "Besides, I was always more interested in how people acted when they thought I had nothing." Tyler stared at me, speechless. He still hadn't touched his coffee. I finally smiled. "Don't worry, cousin. This time, I won't spill a drop." Or have you just been moving numbers around, hoping nobody would look too closely at the shell companies you created? I asked, folding my arms as I leaned back in one of the leather chairs usually reserved for senior partners. Tyler's face drained from red to a ghostly white. Leila, That's right, cousin, I said, voice low and even. I know about every one of them. The fake LLCs, the offshore holding accounts, the investment vehicles that don't actually exist. He turned to our uncle, desperate. You can't let her do this. She left the company, left the family. She doesn't get to waltz back in and act like she gets to do whatever she wants, said Mr. Harrison, Ravell's lead counsel, interrupting smoothly. Mrs. Morgan, legally acting under Morgan Vantage Holdings, acquired a controlling interest in Halcyon West over the last 12 months through diversified subsidiaries. She now holds 51% of all outstanding voting shares. The room fell silent, save for the soft click of my heels as I walked slowly toward the center of the table. I picked up a coffee cup, my roast, from my estate. Much better than the bargain blend you used to mock, isn't it? I said softly, sipping with deliberate calm. Around the table, executives flipped through merger packets. Their hands trembled as they uncovered layer after layer of hidden debt. A few board members pushed back their chairs and stood, phones already pressed to ears. Tyler fumbled with his tablet, frantically swiping through financials. Sweat glistened at his temple. This isn't possible. The reports were fiction, I cut in, just like your carefully crafted illusion of success. You manipulated quarterly earnings, buried liabilities, and funneled pension funds through shell companies to cover losses. Did you really think no one would trace the missing $50 million? 0 cents? Our uncle looked at Tyler like he'd never seen him before. You told us those funds were in safe portfolios. They were, Tyler protested, voice cracking. I was protecting the firm's image, preserving investor confidence. By risking your employees' futures, I snapped. You gambled with retirements and buried it under lies. Halcyon West is insolvent? One board member whispered, eyes wide. I didn't have to answer. Harrison distributed a new set of reports. The silence that followed spoke louder than anything I could say. If you're still with me, good. Because the real power play is just beginning. Tap subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the board meets again, and I take the final seat at the head of the table. Creative writing courtesy of my cousin's financial genius, I said, nodding to Harrison. He tapped the screen, and the lights dimmed as a sleek financial presentation lit up the conference room wall. The graphs didn't lie. As you can see, I continued, Halcyon West's actual debt is nearly 3 times what's been reported. Those flashy acquisitions Tyler's been boasting about, they were funded entirely through borrowed capital, then buried beneath a maze of fabricated subsidiaries. Tyler shot to his feet. You had no right to access those records. I had every right, I replied calmly. While you were barking at me about coffee and staplers, I was conducting a full forensic audit of this company. Gasps stirred around the room. It's incredible what people will say when they think you're invisible, I added, smiling faintly. You should have known better. Across the table, my uncle looked like he'd aged 10 years in as many minutes. His hand trembled on the surface. But Leila, why? Why go through all this? Remember 7 years ago? I asked, voice steady. When I proposed a restructuring plan? One you both dismissed as naive? I glanced at Tyler. You laughed me out of this room, said I didn't understand real business. This plan was reckless, he muttered, his voice weakening. Was it? I raised an eyebrow. Because I used that same plan to build Morgan Vantage into a firm 10 times the size of Halcyon West. While you were chasing headlines and burning money, I was building value. Quietly. Efficient. My phone buzzed. I glanced down and smiled. A message from my real executive team. SEC investigators are standing by. Ready when you are. I looked up. Of course, the pension fund is just the beginning. The SEC is particularly interested in those offshore accounts, the falsified shareholder reports, and Oh, I turned another page on the screen. The insider trading. Tyler's face turned chalk white. I never. The Davidson merger, I countered. You bought shares 2 days before the announcement. Through a shell company. Did you really think no one would trace it back to you? Board members leaned away from him, shifting their chairs. Uncle Richard, he stammered. You can't let her. She's not destroying the company, I said firmly. She's saving what's left. Harrison stood. Effective immediately, Mr. Tyler Morgan is removed as CFO pending investigation. You can't fire me, Tyler shouted, standing so abruptly his chair slammed to the floor. I'm a Morgan, this is my company, Tyler hissed, still standing, red-faced and trembling. Not anymore, I said calmly, lifting my coffee once again. Morgan Vantage owns the controlling interest now. And unlike you, Tyler, I know how to run a company without burying it in fraud. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my uncle, Richard Morgan, the former CEO, finally found his voice. The Morgan name, our reputation, he muttered. It will survive, I assured him gently, once we clean up Tyler's disaster and implement real corporate governance. I glanced across the table. Though it might help if you officially retired. Maybe stop rubber stamping everything Tyler proposed without reading it. The boardroom was silent except for the quiet rustle of pages, directors flipping through documentation of misappropriated funds, manipulated forecasts, and shell transactions. One more thing, I added, standing and lifting my cup. From now on, everyone drinks the same coffee, premium roast. I let that hang in the air. In my companies, we treat everyone with respect, including the ones serving the coffee. By mid-afternoon, news of the boardroom coup had exploded. Halcyon West's stock was suspended from trading while the markets processed the fallout. Financial media swarmed the downtown office tower, shouting questions about the secretary-turned-CEO, who now controlled one of Colorado's oldest private equity firms. I sat in the corner suite, formerly Tyler's, reviewing preliminary audit reports from our forensic team. The damage was even worse than expected. Harrison entered, looking grim. Morgan, he said, placing another thick file on my desk. The SEC is moving forward with criminal charges. They're especially interested in the pension fund. I nodded. Make sure they have everything. My phone buzzed for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Mom, please call us Leila. We didn't know. Uncle David, you always had it in you. Call me anytime. Cousin Brooke, wow, you really showed them. Let's catch up soon. All these people who'd once dismissed me, now eager to realign. I silenced the phone. A quiet knock on the door. My father stepped in, older than I remembered, holding a visitor's badge. They made me get a pass, he said softly, to enter my own company. Not your company anymore, I replied. Truth is, you stopped running it a long time ago. You just handed it over and hoped for the best. He sank into a chair across from me, eyes downcast. I trusted him, Dad said softly, hands folded like a man who had just realized how much he'd overlooked. No, I said, cutting him off. You favored him. That's different. His eyes met mine, heavy with guilt. You favored him when he tanked his first 3 ventures, and you bailed him out each time. When he ran the European division into the ground, you promoted him anyway. When he interrupted every female executive mid-sentence and said women don't understand real business, you called it confidence. And you, he asked, almost a whisper, did building all this make you happy? Did it prove us wrong? I looked up from the reports I was reviewing. This was never about proving you wrong, Dad. It was about proving myself right. He looked away. Every time you dismissed my ideas, every time Tyler mocked me for lacking vision, I was building something real, something sustainable, something that didn't rely on spin, shortcuts, or your last name. The press is calling you a corporate raider now, he said, a tired edge in his voice. The press doesn't understand, I replied. I don't raid companies, I rebuild them. I take what's broken, what was wasted, and I turn it into what it should have been all along. A disturbance in the hallway turned both our heads. Through the glass, we saw Tyler being escorted out by security, his sleek box of personal items clutched in his arms, his designer jacket wrinkled, his perfect hair undone. "He'll face charges," I said quietly. "Just the pension fund alone carries serious weight." Dad's face crumpled. "My son? In prison?" "Actions have consequences," I replied. "Maybe if you'd taught him that earlier, we wouldn't be here." My phone buzzed again. Another message from the forensic team. More irregularities. Client funds diverted. Contracts pushed through for kickbacks. Fraud that went deeper than we'd thought. "You know," Dad said after a pause, "I always wondered why you stayed after we rejected your restructuring plan. Took a job as a secretary. You could have walked away." "I stayed to learn," I said. "To understand this company from the ground up. While Tyler played CEO, I was listening to employees, mapping the blind spots." A knock at the door. My executive team, top-tier talent from Sterling Enterprises, had arrived. Calm, capable, and ready to begin the transition. "It's time," I said, standing. "You should go home, Dad. Rest. We'll take it from here." He nodded slowly and rose to his feet, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. "The family dinners," he began. "Will you still come to family dinners?" he asked quietly. "No," I said firmly. "Those ended when you and Tyler laughed me out of the boardroom 7 years ago." I let the words settle, then added more softly, "But maybe, once you've both learned some humility, we can start over, as equals, this time." The next few weeks reshaped Halcyon West from the inside out. Tyler's inner circle, his yes-men and opportunists, were quietly shown the door. In their place, we brought in people who knew what they were doing. The buried debt? We faced it head-on, absorbed through Morgan Vantage's capital reserves. The stolen pension funds were replenished, with interest. The headlines buzzed. Secretary to CEO, Leila Morgan's bold takeover. Tyler Morgan indicted for fraud. Sister steps in to save Halcyon West. The corporate world just met its quietest powerhouse, but they still missed the point. This was never about revenge, not even about justice. It was about transformation, of a broken company, of a fractured family, of a flawed business culture. Tyler eventually pled guilty to multiple counts of financial misconduct. My father retired for good. The board was rebuilt with independent directors who actually asked questions. I moved my office, left a corner suite behind, turned it into a daycare center for employees' children. It felt like a better investment of space. 6 months later, an envelope arrived. It was an invitation to Dad's retirement party, handwritten inside. "I finally understand what you were trying to tell us all those years ago, about building something real, about treating people with respect. I'm sorry we didn't listen then. Will you give us a chance to listen now?" I thought of all those meetings, the laughter, the doubt. Then I remembered my grandfather's words. "Success isn't in what you take, it's in what you build." I never set out to become a headline, I just wanted to be heard. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my place, or what you're building in your own life. We all face moments where we're overlooked or underestimated. Don't shrink, study, build, and let your work speak for itself. And if you believe in second chances, in quiet strength, in building something real, subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Because sometimes the best way to reclaim your voice is to build a table no one can push you away from.